Hello and welcome to another episode of the Viva Bastardo show. This week we have Eric Minoff, Bonhams car specialist, auction specialist. He has driven and seen almost every car ever made on the planet. He has some amazing stories. Also, just to let you guys know, there is some sound quality issues. You can hear it fine, but it's not like tip-top crystal bell, whatever that is, sound quality. So don't send me enraged emails. All right, let's get into it. Eric Minoff.
Philip Bugattis.
Thank you so much for coming on the Viva Bastardo show. Do you want to explain to the world, the four listeners, who you are? Do you want me to do it? Or we could take turns.
We could take turns. That sounds good. I'd like to hear what someone else has to say about me.
Eric seduces people into buying cars with his silky voice over the phone during auctions at Bonhams.
Yes, I also seduce people into selling them too.
And selling. You know what? I feel. Should we just get right into it? So you've been working at Bonhams for how long?
15 years.
Was that your first job?
Pretty much, yeah.
What was before the pretty much? Was it something minimal?
I drove an ambulance for
that's right.
several years. That's real nightmare fuel.
Listen, everyone wants nightmare fuel.
Yeah.
Because the world is so lovely and peaceful right now that, you need a counterbalance.
Yeah. Me as an 18-year-old showing up for your medical emergency is going to do it. And I worked at Chicago Board of Trade a little bit back when there was a growing concern with people trading in a pit.
Like in trading places?
Yeah.
You were one of those geezers with the jackets? Is that a denim poplar seersucker? What is that?
No, it's made of nylon.
It doesn't wick.
There's like a set of rules, and this is going back, and maybe wrong, probably isn't, but there was a set of rules. You weren't allowed to wear jeans, couldn't wear shorts, had to wear a collared shirt, needed to wear a tie, and needed to wear a jacket. But that was all that was described. So the jacket could have like a wild print on it and a mesh back.
But I thought they all had to wear those jackets like in trading places.
Yeah. Well, they did because they also had a lot of paper that they were carrying because they had all their trading cards that they would write. Not trading cards like this is my favorite.
My Michael Jordan
Morgan's
card.
my favorite banker.
I see J.P. Morgan's Rothschild.
Yeah. No, they had like cards that they'd write. What they bought, how much they bought it for, and who they bought it from.
It sounds Dickensian now, doesn't it?
It is. It's quaint. It's really. And then my job there, because I was doing this.
Do you think there's like a Colonial Williamsburg version of the stock market that's going to happen later on? You go in and you see people writing stuff down. You can watch them yell at each other. None of that stuff happens anymore, right?
I mean, not really. No, it's all done electronically.
Like there's people on the floor, but I think they're just there for show.
Yeah, they're actually animatronic.
Yeah.
They're not real people.
It's like Chuck E. Cheese.
I think
you put in a quarter and they all start like.
People say they're like crisis actors. They're financial actors. But
just
there to
crisis actors are people.
I like this conspiracy
making it look like there's stuff going on in the market. It's all online. Nothing's happening there.
That's an amazing conspiracy theory to start. Actually, I was reading about the guy. Do you know about the guy who started the movement "All Birds Are Drones"?
Oh yeah, I heard of this. Yes,
it's amazing.
Yeah, because now it's become a real thing. Mm-hmm. Now there's people who he started as a joke, but now it's taken off, and there are people who think all birds are drones.
Like the flying spaghetti monster.
Can we think up one right now that we could just launch into the ether?
Well, he just pointed out that the people at the stock market are actual actors.
Yeah, they're actors. It's not real.
It's not real. None of it's real.
It's all done by a megamind-like computer.
It's Soros.
Yeah.
But I feel like it needs to be much like all birds are drones is so crazy. I feel like it has to be so crazy that it becomes believable to a certain percentage of the population.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing because planes don't actually fly using Bernoulli's principle. There's just strings attached to the wings, and they have satellites that hold them up.
Oh, it's like on a guy like a I was going to say skeletrics, but no one's that. It's like those little electric cars.
Exactly.
Like trams.
Yeah. Or puppets.
Marionettes.
Yes.
So there's a marionette master who's controlling all the flights.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about the baggage?
The baggage?
Yeah, is the baggage included in that?
That's shipped using tubes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Vacuum tubes.
Vacuum tubes like the bank.
I love those things.
Those are fun.
Have you ever seen one in action? I've never actually been to a place.
There's a place called hospitals where they still have to actually transmit physical things from place to place.
They have vacuum tubes.
And they have vacuum tubes.
Really?
Oh, I think they're great. They're the coolest.
Do you ever go in like the suburbs and go to like a drive-up ATM kind of bank?
Yeah.
Because they'll still have the
Yeah.
tube, like they'll have like
Yeah,
the
you
one
put your money in the tube and then
Yeah.
You should do that in your house.
I would.
But you could
I
do that
would
with
love to.
diapers.
I mean, yeah, that would be stinky.
If it unraveled, it
Well,
would-
actually,
and you've got to send like a
there's-
tube chimney sweep, like
I
a
got-
tiny tube
I
chimney
got-
sweep up into the tubes.
and I'm gonna get targeted more for it. I got targeted for an ad on like Instagram, I think, for a vacuum laundry tube thing where you just
I've
like
seen this.
throw your laundry towards the hole in the wall and it gets sucked up and taken to, I assume, the laundry room, but I guess you can take it
Or
anywhere you
get sent to a
want.
laundry room in a jail.
I mean, if you're really rich, it just gets sent to a dumpster.
But you like the woman like does like the behind the back throw.
Yeah.
Like she's doing like trick
Yeah.
shots to get the laundry in the
Yeah.
shoe.
Really?
Yeah.
Mind you, it's also usually just a mom.
Yeah,
character. It's
yeah. No,
it's
that's
not really
that's
gender
not really,
neutral.
No, it's not. It's not. It's unwoke entirely.
very
It's very
unwoke.
much
You
asleep.
could have a larger size tube, so it could just, and you could just, like if you wanted to go to different areas of the house.
Yeah,
You
Futurama thought of that.
you just go in, you throw the child in there, like your wife's in the other room, you just throw the child, and you just deliver it into the other room.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I would totally ride a tube elevator. That sounds real exciting.
Remember those lifts or elevator, that with the no, they're just kind of, they have no door, they're just like constant, they're on like a,
I've never seen one in
do you know
real
what I'm
life.
talking about? They just kind of, you just step into them and they go up and
Oh
down.
yeah, I've seen that. That sounds. I mean, they're not moving very fast.
No, it's not like you,
Conceptually,
it's
it
like a
sounds
Wile E.
horrifying,
Coyote kind of
But
thing.
yeah, I guess it's like a slow Shabbos elevator. Which, for the non-New Yorkers in Goyim that are listening,
Goyim.
that's an elevator almost exclusive to New York City and maybe Israel that stops at every floor so that you don't have to press the button and activate the elevator.
Because if you're an Orthodox Jew on the Shabbos, you can't press buttons, you can't
Yeah,
activate.
you can't do anything. This is not.
So that's why stuff is always on, right?
Well, it's
Yeah.
also why some buildings here have a elevator guy still.
At work, you're telling
Oh,
someone to do
contrarian.
something. You're telling someone to do something. You're telling them to work.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
You could maybe get away with, depending on your, and Jews love to argue, so depending on your interpretation, you could say, oh, it'd be really great if, we went to the 5th floor. You're not asking him
But
to
that's
go to the
leading
5th
the
floor.
witness. That's
You're
the-
overly musing.
Yeah.
No, it would be
But
nice.
no, technically speaking, no, you could not ask someone to do something. That would sort of defeat the purpose of no one's doing it.
What if
So
they
could you
ask
say, oh, my gout's really playing up, like these 5 floors, and then someone goes, oh, let me.
Yeah, no, or you could just get in the elevator that stops at floors 2, 3, 4, and 5, which is what a Shabbos elevator does.
Or you have the Shabbos Goy.
Well, that's the musing.
The
that's
Shabbos
gonna
Goy
be
is
great.
the non-Jewish person who just does all this shit for you. I feel like you could have a whole Shabbos Goy. Is there a rental service?
No, because Orthodox Jews don't believe in that. Not the rental service, the Shabbos Goy.
Oh, is that bullshit?
Yeah. I think it's something that like
I really
Well, there goes my future career.
Reconstructionists and
It
reformers
was
are
like-
like, that's gotta work, right?
Yeah.
I haven't really read the book much, but
That's
it's gotta work. Remember in
I
Hebrews?
feel like you went to yeshiva.
Yeah, do you?
Yeah, I have
that's,
this feeling.
that's a wrong feeling.
Is it wrong?
Yeah, I didn't go to yeshiva.
Do you have kosher? Do you keep kosher?
No.
Okay. I mean the
Not,
kosher thing.
not even a little bit.
You love bacon.
Oh yeah, pork street.
I know. It's
Milk,
probably-
milk and meat.
What is it?
Wonderful.
I feel like Jews love pork more than Christians love pork.
Well, that's because it's something you're
Verboten.
not supposed to do.
I know, because the love for pork amongst Jews is I love, bacon, shrimp.
Yeah.
Wait, is that true?
Yeah, I feel like it's because it's lust for the forbidden.
Yeah, you want to make something uninteresting? Like, oh, drugs, those are cool. Legal. Oh.
Maybe-
Heroin's legal. I don't want that.
Why don't you do that as a technique for selling cars, man? This car is illegal in 43 countries.
Well, I mean,
Oh.
it works pretty well. It's called JDM.
But it's illegal.
Some are, if they were built 25 or more years ago here in the United States, 15 or more years ago.
Okay, so here's a question for you. I have this debate with people. When you bring a car in, you just can bring a car in if it's 25 years old. It doesn't have to be 25 years and a particular month it was made.
It has to be 25 years old to the day.
I've heard that's not, but
Well,
okay.
okay, that's the letter of the law.
That's the letter of the
However,
law.
the people at the ports seemingly are not bothering.
Because I
with
had this discussion a while ago, because I've been bringing cars that are 25 years old only. Never had a problem. But before I did that, I talked to my friends at Cosdell Because they've been doing that for years. They said never have a problem. No one cares about it. It's just the year.
It's the kind
Have
of
you
thing
read
where-
this, or have you read this in little letters somewhere, or is this just your? I want to know where your knowledge is coming from. I want to know, Minoff.
No, a friend of mine had a car that he was going to import, but he was told he should not
By who?
import it until it is.
Who told him? George Soros.
No, it was imported. I don't remember if it was imported or what.
Okay, so that's the thing. That's popular. I think that's the problem. I think it's not to the day.
But what-
I mean, I personally, you know, as is with most things involving cars and government, there is the rule and then there's the reality.
Right.
The rule is whatever it is. The reality is they're not going to check. I mean, to the day you're going to provide manufacturing papers. It doesn't say the day the car was built in the door jamb like it does on a car made for the U.S. market. If
How
you
do
open
you
the
spell jam?
with the B at the end.
Oh, so good. You know how often I see people spelling it door J-A-M?
Yeah.
And
You're gonna put on some toast.
Yeah, you're gonna put on some. I like some door jam. Yeah,
I've
exactly.
seen cars with door jamb as well, very old ones.
I
that
feel
have
like
been
that's
sitting
like
for a long time.
that's like smegma.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
wow, we are off the rails.
That's nice.
We are-
That's a word I haven't said in like 35 years.
That's a word I never thought would
Yeah,
have been
let's-
incorporated into a podcast.
Yeah, maybe we
about
just don't
cars.
say that ever.
Is that like a technical term, or is that not a technical
I
term?
don't. Why? No. Get off. No.
What? Okay, all right. I just thought we'd get some more sponsors with that. We can talk about that extensively. There's a big market.
When you have Glenn on the podcast, you can ask him.
Yeah.
Oh wait. So what was the car
you-
your friend was bringing in?
It was a 22B.
Oh. Okay. They might pay a little more attention to that.
Not really.
Not
It looks like-
really.
it just looks like a Subaru, right?
If the honest reality is, when it comes to customs and the DMV, they have a hammer, and everything looks like a nail. So if you go to register or import your whatever it is, it doesn't matter how much it's worth. They are just processing paperwork. They get a piece of paper in front of them, and they're either going to accept it or deny it. And sometimes it's unfortunate, and I hate to say this because like I deal with a lot of these agencies a lot, sometimes it just exit the building, return, see a different person. The result will be different.
Wait, you're talking about? I'm lost now. Who are you? What are you talking about? Registering cars?
Registering cars, importing, just sometimes it just is. You
Yeah,
get
no,
the
it's
wrong
true.
person who
why you
sees
have-
their job is to create work, and the best way to create work is to say, whatever I have doesn't work.
Right.
You need to go back and do this.
Right.
And I've now used some of my time, which is great because I'm just being paid to sit here. So it's.
That's why you need a guy.
Yeah, you need a guy.
There's a Hasidic guy in Brooklyn. that I
Yeah,
use.
everyone uses that guy.
Yeah, and I love
Except
it.
on Fridays.
Yeah, he has a Shabbos goy.
He has a Shabbos boat who steps in.
That's right.
Wait, is there actually a guy?
Yeah,
He's
no,
actually a guy, and he's
I,
actually Hasidic.
and I go there, and it's genius because first he's got his like 12-year-old daughters working there, and they barely acknowledge you as a human being when you go in. It's kind of amazing. But you give him all this stuff, and then and like a couple of weeks later, he just goes over, go and get your papers, and then that's it.
That's it.
Go and get your papers.
Well, you're not. He's not being paid for his customer service.
That's
So
right.
people he interacts with
That's
are being
right.
paid for their customer service.
I would like a little, a little banter maybe.
Yeah.
We could talk about.
Have you ever been at the DMV? They're not much into the banter sort of thing.
I've had a few bantery people,
Have
but then
they?
but
were
then,
they in line or were they behind the counter?
No, behind.
Oh,
Because you know what? I think they're misunderstood. I feel like people are never very happy about being there.
Yeah,
But if you reach out the hand of friendship,
Are you actually allowed to touch them, or is that like you go to jail for
I
7 years?
lean across, I embrace.
that sounds like something you go to jail.
That's like a Harvey Weinstein kind of
That's like if you lay hands on like an MTA employee, it's like 7 years.
That's like Giuliani do you not read this thing?
About Giuliani? Has he been in the news recently? Like in the last several years?
He
Come
said
on.
he said he was attacked from behind by some guy at a thing, and then they looked at the
Yeah, I
video.
heard about
They looked at
this.
the video, and it was just the guy like, literally gives him a pat on the back.
Yeah, I heard about this.
It
Yeah.
was amazing.
I heard he also dropped the charges.
Yeah, he dropped the charges.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
Also, why was he in Staten Island?
Because it's the bastion of republicanism in New York City,
He was there for the summer.
Good thing Staten Island.
He was summering on Staten
among
Island.
other things.
Good sandwiches.
So Bonhams, 15 years.
A lot of cars, a lot of motorcycles.
So I know that you have like, this is, give me the top 3 most enraging things about people trying to sell their cars, because it's got to, I mean, I know you're going to have to narrow it down from a list of 47,000, but because it's got to be, presumably everyone always thinks their car is much more valuable than it is. Is that 99% of the time, sometimes it is more valuable?
I would say that the number of instances where I ask someone what they think their car is worth, and they give a value that is...
Can you give a bit of rough an example of?
I consigned a Cobra, a 289 Cobra, and this is a guy I've known for a long time, and I've worked with him on a number of things on both sides. And I was like, "What do you think the car's worth?" And he said, "I think the estimate should be this." And I said, "Great. The discussion has been had. I think you're spot on, and consigned the car, sold it for top estimate."
Okay.
But I think it's sometimes it's
Wait,
hard.
that was not the example I was like, what you were going to give. So for instance, someone wants to sell a Porsche and they say, "Oh, it's worth 250 grand."
I mean, that's the rare example. The common example is, I have car X. I see that the world record price for car X is whatever. I think mine is probably better than that. So I think the estimate should start at 20% above world record. Which is great. That's lovely. I like that. I like the
I like your gusto, sir.
I like the
Confidence is
confidence.
good.
That's nice. Let's say you're a buyer, because it's shocking, especially. I mean, there's certain types of, and I'll point this out first. People don't choose the cars they buy. Cars choose the people they will allow to inhabit them. That's why. And look, stereotypes are not stereotypes are not always true. We know that. But they're true enough at the time to reinforce the stereotype. So if I say, and that guy's a Corvette guy, you know exactly what I'm saying. You know exactly that he's wearing jorts. He has a shirt with a Corvette on it. He has a
New Balances or Air Monarchs?
Absolutely, yeah, and they're white.
Wait, what are jorts?
Jean shorts.
Oh, okay.
You don't wear jean shorts?
I'm just familiar with jeggings. I didn't know there was a subsection.
Yeah, or like a jean short onesie would be the kind of thing you might wear.
Are they jites?
Probably. I don't know what those are. What are jites? Oh, jean tights?
Yeah.
I think
That's a jegging.
That's what a jegging is.
Why isn't it jite?
Because that's
like
a bit shite, I think.
Jites are shite?
Yeah.
See, it's all a marketing campaign.
But in any case, so certain marques have people who have higher opinions of what their cars are worth when they're selling them, but very low opinions when they're buying them.
I always love, you know what?
And you can sometimes catch them doing that exact same thing in a sentence.
That's the Italian model for watches. Like, I can't tell you how often when you're buying a watch from an Italian dealer, it's an astronomical price, but when they're trying to buy one from you, it's they're outraged at your asking price, which is quite reasonable.
Yeah. So it's amazing how there are folks who will come to our auctions and always be like, "Oh, these prices are outrageous. They're way too high. What do you think your car's worth? Oh, it's worth a lot more than that." Okay. And I mean, it's very hard to get for a seller sometimes to accept or not to accept, but necessarily to step into the feet of the buyer. To be in the shoes of the buyer and see.
Even though they've been in those shoes.
Even though they've been in those shoes, suddenly when the shoe is on the other foot, it's very difficult to accept the realities of how selling a car works. And also that selling a car is really hard. That's why you pay people to do it.
So what makes a car sell at auction if it's not anything particularly special?
A couple things.
Luck.
You mean like if it's like a Porsche 911, one of a million?
Right, for instance.
And I say that as a Porsche owner. We have a 911. It is one of a million plus.
But it's a lovely burgundy.
It's a lovely, it's burgundy red.
Give us the specs.
1968 911T.
Ooh.
Yeah, 110 horsepower maybe?
On a good day.
On a good day.
But with the NOS, what is it?
It's 110 horsepower and it's got a can of unopened NOS, I guess. Is that the energy drink? Is that what you're talking
It's
about?
been baking in the sun.
Yeah. Delicious.
It's like an energy drink, really.
Yeah, but if it's just a generic car.
Yeah.
And look, all cars are great, but some cars are more common than others. It's about how the car is presented, the quality, condition, and everything about the car. And then also, no matter how great of a presentation we can do on a car and how wonderful a car is as a vehicle, it all comes down to there's a number at the bottom of the page. And what is that number? And I mean, reserve has an effect, obviously, not an insignificant one, but that estimate has a very large effect on what people will do, even without reserve.
So, because I've noticed in Philips watch auctions, they always have reserves or estimates that are very low.
Yeah.
And I know that those
think
watches.
of all the confidence you have. You're like, ooh, well, maybe I'll get it for that.
Exactly. But the thing that kills me is I know that estimate is bullshit. I know that there's no way this watch is going to sell for like between 6
Do
and
you?
12. Yes.
But
hang
if it
on.
does?
But that's the thing. Part of me, the endless sucker that I am, thinks, well, I know that estimate's unrealistic, but I should just put in a bid just in case.
Yeah.
And it's I know I'm being manipulated, but I can't help myself in this.
Right. And I mean,
because I'm a weak milk toast.
It's not that. It's that you are a normal person with. Not that you're normal, but like you have that is a normal psychological response to that. Looks like I would pay that.
Right.
And
so that gets people involved.
The more. Here's the thing: if you're bidding in a vacuum against nobody, your confidence levels may not be as strong.
Right.
So if you're bidding on a car...
Hang on, let me just... so your confidence levels are not that strong because you feel like you're the only one who thinks this is any good, so maybe it's not that good.
Am I the only schmuck that thinks this?
Yeah.
Is it just me that thinks this car is worth that much? Am I overpaying?
Right.
And because cars have... they used to be pure hobbyist things. Now there are asset classes, and the more the money matters... or the less the money matters, the more the money matters. Which is to say, the more money someone has, the more they care about how much is being spent and how much they are, getting out of it.
So wait, if you have less money, wait, what? Who?
The less.
How'd you get this money?
I found that.
Did you just talk yourself into a coup de
No,
sac?
I found that when selling a car or buying a car, if someone is incredibly wealthy, they will not. They will refuse to lose money on something, even though the money is meaningless. Like if they lose $100,000 on a car, if they have a pile of Skittles the size of a building and they miss a few Skittles, it's not going to actually make an appreciable difference, but it's blood sport.
Right.
Whereas if you're dealing with someone for whom the money is relevant, they will be more willing to just, that's the way the world is. I will accept that.
Right.
Or if they're buying, they'll be more willing to keep bidding.
So do you think it's ego? People, yeah.
I mean, everything. This is all ego. Nobody needs. I am selling. I love it when I used to live in San Francisco and everyone was trying to make the world. I'm making the world a better place. We're making a Twitter for cats.
Did you wear square-toed Aldo shoes?
I didn't. I've never worn. I think square-toed Aldo shoes are disgusting. That's the bottom of the barrel.
When I think of first couple of things. One is whenever I meet people who live in San Francisco, it's important to say Frisco.
Oh,
with
God,
a straight face. You got to say with a straight face. Oh, you're from Frisco.
Yeah,
but
also skin crawl.
I love it. And then also square-toed Aldos. It's like an epidemic, like roaches in New York.
Is it there?
Yeah.
I guess
I was going to say Allbirds is more of an epidemic over there.
I left in 2011, so Allbirds didn't exist. Square-toed Aldos.
Come on now.
Maybe we're on the way out by then.
I think there were a lot of no-toes. It was mostly sandals. And if not sandals, it was just everyone dresses like shit there is the short answer. It's like, the more money I've got, the more I'm going to look like I dress like shit. I wear a hoodie that doesn't fit right. I'm going to wear jeans
I
all
always
the
thought
time.
those people try to be dressed like New Yorkers, but like somehow not.
No, they're not. They're pushing against the fact that New Yorkers take like 2 seconds to be like, I'm gonna make it so I look presentable today. Whatever that presentable is, it doesn't necessarily mean they are wearing like a tailored suit. They just look like they spent some time thinking about what their outfit was. Whereas in San Francisco, people, at least when I was there, maybe it's changed.
When you were a bike
messenger. There's a lot of pride in looking like you didn't care how you dressed. Which, look, that's great too. It's
Well, there's a word.
one less thing to worry
It's
about.
like a version of sprezzatura that's gone
Spazzatura, as our mutual friend Bradley described our former president's style.
That's right. That's pretty good.
But no, I mean,
So I derailed you, man. You were,
Yeah,
you were in the middle of, you were talking yourself into some conversational corner you couldn't extricate yourself from about rich people and there's an ego or something. Or
Well, I mean, it's all about ego, and because again, nobody needs. I am selling things that nobody needs, and not just nobody needs. There's like a societal net zero for what I do. I help primarily rich white men buy and sell things they don't need. I mean,
Right.
that is that is in a nutshell the description of the auction business.
I feel like you do not need therapy because you understand who you are in this world.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's no reason to sugarcoat what I do, and I love when people say
yes.
like, oh, you know, I'm helping.
you're helping people achieve their dreams.
If I want to look at what I'm doing as a societal net positive, I can say, you know, look, motor cars are in a lot of ways a reflection of the way that people and society is feeling, or whatever is the popular movement in design or in culture or whatever. And you can see that in, like, if you look at cars from the 20s, you see a lot of, and then 30s, you see a lot of Art Deco features, right? And where did the Art Deco movement come from? It came from the opening of King Tut's tomb in, 1924, I think?
Wait, no, that was a separate thing. There was a whole Egyptian craze but they incorporated real Egyptian ideas. I don't think it was incorporated.
But
Art Deco.
if you look at Art Deco and you look at Egyptian
Really?
design, it's very similar. It's all long.
The Egyptians are the
straight
original
lines.
flappers.
Yeah, totally. A lot of the short
the
hair.
bob, yeah.
The bob is not exactly the thing I was thinking of as Art Deco, but then if you look at like cars from the 50s, what is it? It's all jet age, and it doesn't matter what country. I know that the United States like really went deep in jet age,
Right.
but if you look at like a launch ship, it's got sort of aeronautical design features.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
I'd like.
Look at the taillights. They
Well,
look like
maybe.
jet engines. That's not a. That's
Okay,
not
so
a,
what about? So what are cars doing now then?
but they're looking like phones. People want electronics. They want appliances for cars, and
Right.
now they have them. Congratulations.
But don't you think they've been appliancey for a while?
Yeah, but I think they've crossed the uncanny valley of
Although you know who's not doing appliancey cars?
what, Hyundai?
Hyundai.
Hyundai?
Yeah.
I think Hyundai's cars are
The electric
honestly, the South Koreans are doing. I think they're making beautiful cars. And I don't know a lot about modern cars because they kind of make me glaze over because they're just appliances, all of them, even
Right.
the supercars. Not that I won't sell one, happy to sell one. But they're great
Well,
looking.
you know what's interesting to me about Hyundai is that I think for years, no one ever considered Hyundai as making anything memorable. They were cars you drove and you threw away at the end of it. But I think they seized on the electric revolution as a chance to go, okay, we're going to make stuff that's super different from everyone else. And the Ioniq 5, I was just looking at the Ioniq 6 the other day. I mean, they're really doing stuff that's radical in terms of design.
They're taking advantage of the fact that, first off, electric cars as a platform offers an opportunity
Sure.
to divorce yourself from what has traditionally been the requirements of the ICE, internal combustion engine car, which is to say, an internal combustion engine car is a big lump, it needs cooling, and the engine has to be somewhere.
Right.
Whereas if you look at electric cars, it was actually General Motors that pioneered
The
the skateboard design.
I'm really. Well, you're right. I keep saying this. I really hope we're on the cusp of an amazing revolution in design. But Hyundai are doing things that most people aren't in terms of design.
I think they're making prototype concept cars
That's
that
right.
you can buy.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
they're smoothing out the lines and they're getting rid of certain design elements or softening the elements in ways that look good, but acknowledge the fact that this is not a necessary element of the car. Like the front of the Ioniq 5 doesn't have a radiator, doesn't have a
Right.
fake radiator,
But
doesn't
that's
have an
what I-
opening.
yeah,
It has a big panel.
Right.
And I think that's great. I think it's
Me
awesome
too.
that they're incorporating, like, look, this is a false panel, and we're kind of going backwards from for those few people, or maybe a lot of people, I don't know, who don't realize, like, electric cars aren't new. Electric cars outsold gasoline cars in the early part of the 20th century.
Yeah.
But electric cars looked very different from gasoline cars. Again, they didn't have the same requirements in design, so you could make an electric car primarily marketed towards women because they didn't have a starter, they were easy to operate, they were dirty, they didn't vibrate, blah, blah, blah. So they looked like a telephone booth on wheels. Essentially a living room on wheels. You had a couch on one side, a couple of sitting chairs on the other side, there was a tiller to steer it, and shades you could draw.
Coffee maker.
Yeah, totally. All that stuff.
Little fridge.
And as electric cars started to lose to gas cars, primarily after the invention of the starter.
Well, a large part of what drove the acceleration of gas cars was the First World War.
And the electric starter.
And that. But mostly the First World War. We're going to throw down something.
The electric starter was the biggest.
Fine, electric starter. Because
he's
not going to win this. I'm going to say World War One.
Why? I'd like to hear your.
Why? Because they needed machines that would work, and it was a fuel situation because you couldn't charge those things quickly, and they didn't have much in the way of range in terms of gasoline cars. For the First World War, they needed to have transport for troops. They eventually needed tanks, airplanes, all that stuff needed gas. Was much more. That as a fuel system is much more practical than having electricity.
Oh no, that was always true. But
it was like
the battlefield is not Manhattan. Well, sort of.
No, I know, but what happens in war? You see, great technological advances are often made precipitated by war.
Yeah, no, that's
they push forward technology.
It pushes forward technology.
That's
It's
right.
the best way to kill someone.
Well, I mean, and all the ancillary supporting technologies around the best way to kill someone
and break things. Yeah,
and break things.
Well,
and that's what's happening actually in Ukraine. Actually, oddly enough, is that's pushing Europe towards renewable fuels and more green.
Yeah.
Because they have to. They've got to get off the Russian business.
All the chatter for the last few decades in the United States about we make more fuel efficient cars. I know how you can make more fuel efficient cars. Make gas $7 a gallon. All of a sudden, people are going to want to buy fuel efficient cars.
Right.
But I mean, World War I definitely moved ahead. The IC engine, but the ability to not have to crank it,
right.
which involves both strength and danger.
Yeah, because you could break your wrist with that hand.
Oh, you could.
Right?
The reason the electric starter was invented is because the guy who invented it, his friend was killed after he tried to help someone start their car. They advanced the spark as opposed to retarded the spark, and that causes the crank to spin very quickly. And it broke his jaw, and then he died of, I think, sepsis or pneumonia or something like that. So, yeah, maybe. But, I mean, the point is that, those electric cars, they looked like these telephone booths. And as they started to lose market share, and this was also true for steam cars, when you look at electric cars from the late 20s and even the 30s, because they did, like, Detroit Electric existed up until the early 30s, they look like gas cars. They have a radiator, which is useless because they don't have a radiator. They have radiator surround. They have slats on the side of the hood to help with cooling for the engine that's not there.
That aesthetic change, that happened when? In the 20s?
In the 20s and 30s, as electric car companies were losing, and steam car companies were losing to gas cars, they made their cars look like gas cars with all the design elements of a gas car that a gas car has because it needs them. It needs a radiator. It needs cooling slats.
That's always what irritates me about electric car design, like the Tesla, although less so now, and the Mach E and all those things where they pretend to have these front grills, these radiators.
Yeah.
And I always found, I'm guessing that decision was based on weeks and weeks of market research, focus groups, all the rest, where they didn't want to freak out people with something too futuristic, so they leave the idea of a grill.
Yeah, but 100%. They want people to feel like it still is, it's familiar.
But I wonder if that...
Well, you have to ease people into adoption of new things.
Oh, always. Yeah, but I think...
But I wonder, like, look at, like you're saying, the Ioniq 5 there's no nod to the conventional idea of a grill. Right.
Yeah, but again, I think it depends on the market you're playing towards. Like, let's say you're going to introduce, an electric pickup truck.
Sure.
You want that to look exactly like a gas pickup.
But the Rivian doesn't.
The Rivian looks just like a gas pickup.
No.
Yeah.
I think
the proportions are.
No, I'm not talking about proportion. I'm talking about the front fascia. Looks to me at least. There's no nod to a grill. It's just it's really beautiful. I think the front of that car, that truck is really lovely.
I think it is.
And it doesn't. To me, they're not pretending. They're not pretending it's a gas car.
Except for the way that the silhouette and the overall design is
but
very
that's
much gas guzzler.
Yeah, but that's well.
But that's because I think people want the familiar, and that's fine. I think it's great. You can't push people to accept things overnight. But it's interesting to me just because electric cars divorce you from the necessaries of having all this extra space for mechanics.
Right.
And no car company has really pushed it to the edge in concept or in production of what you could potentially do with an electric car. But, we'll see, I guess. They're all appliances anyways. When it comes to modern cars, I get asked a lot, you must drive a lot of cars. If you could have any car to drive every day, what would you want? And the answer is, something connects to my phone, I don't really care. I mean, I'm going point A to point B, everything can do the speed limit, which is, or a little bit of 10 over it, which is basically how fast you need to go. So, as long as I connect to my phone, I'm happy. I can play music, I can make phone calls.
The thing I would like is, first of all, I'm super into electric. I really love the experience of driving it. I think it's really fun. I think that to make some sort of comparison between electric and ICE is it's kind of a waste of time, really, because it's just a different experience. But for me, I would like an electric car that just drives itself on the highway.
Yeah.
So, because I like the idea that you could just, you're talking about the living room on wheels kind of thing. Like, that would be great if you just sit down, you turn your seat so you're facing your family, you sit, you watch TV or you talk to people. I like that idea.
Well,
but driving on the highway is a pain in the ass.
Well, I agree, and that's why, obviously Tesla is in hot water for obviously mismarketing their stuff as full self-driving autopilot that isn't, it's not actually self-driving, full self-driving, but mostly there, but we're going to call it full self.
Right.
GM Super Cruise is very honest about what it is, and Mercedes has something like that, and you get on the highway, you turn it on, and you still have to pay attention because they're not at 100%, and
sure.
If you're beta testing something on your phone, what happens? Your phone crashes. I lost a few minutes.
Right.
But if you're beta testing something in a car, especially the driving element of it, if you crash into something and you get injured by yourself, fine. You were the beta tester, you kind of...
Yeah, but presumably this isn't showing up as beta tested.
Yeah, that's exactly what the Tesla stuff is.
Right.
But whereas if you... it's just like when you're on the highway and you see that guy in a Dodge Charger that's weaving in and out without signaling ever, and it's usually a Charger or a Challenger.
Usually it's a Charger or a Challenger, or around here an Altima.
Right,
yeah,
right.
It is.
Yeah, here in Florida, a lot of Altimas. But the point is, we're all playing to a set of rules, and they're playing to a different set, and I got no problem with them playing to that different set, except for the fact that they're putting everyone else in danger for their playing to a different set of rules. If you're on a racetrack, by all means, everyone's playing to that set of rules. And I think a lot of people feel safer on a racetrack with a bunch of people going inches away from each other at very high speeds because they know the other guy is going to be playing by the same set of rules. Whereas when you're on the highway, you want everyone playing the same set of rules in that you're not going to weave in and out. Your speeds are going to be roughly equivalent, and if they're not, move over.
You're not talking about politics, right?
I'm not talking about politics at all.
It sounds.
No, this is purely rules of the road. I don't discuss politics with anyone, clients especially. But
wait, I'm a client. I thought we were friends, man. I'm just a client.
You're a potential client.
And if this thing in front of me was not here, I would consider discussing politics with you.
No, don't worry about it. You have to go down that rabbit hole.
But so it's the self-driving cars are great, but I'd like for people to still have to pay attention.
Right. But I'm looking forward to the idea of radical design. I feel like we should be where the 70s were with concept cars with electric cars. Remember how in the 70s it was just an endless, and I'm always blabbering on about the sort of halcyon era of the 70s with the Boomerang, the Citroen Carrion, which is an unfortunate name now.
You still have crash safety regulations, though.
No, I know, but surely they might. You just think there's got to be. I would love to see all the rejected stuff. Because you have to think there must be so much amazing stuff that just doesn't get past the multi-layered boards of average.
Oh yeah, unquestionably. It's like I bet it's like Alien, where you see all like the half-baked you know.
Like there's the
projects
guy
where-
Ford that had like the new electric F-150, but he put the cab at the back. He's like, put the bed in the front.
Yeah.
Right.
CEOs if you
Cab
want.
backwards.
Right.
Right.
That way
makes
you can
sense.
see what's in the front of the. That'd be.
You could check on your merchandise.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep an eye on it.
Exactly. If stuff's flying out of it, you know.
Yeah,
It's hitting the
you get
windshield.
people sneaking into the bed
Yeah.
to sleep.
Right.
Mhm.
It's like those bikes you see moms taking kids to school and they got the big bucket in the front.
Yeah. You know, the kids are in there.
Yeah.
One of them fell out. You'll know.
Yeah, you'll see it.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I'm always amazed when I see people. I know that in Holland that's totally normal because that's, like you say, there's a kind of accepted rule of the road thing. Everyone knows that a lot of people are on bikes, a lot of people take their kids. But in New York, when I see people ferrying their kids around in the front buckets on the bike, I feel like I would have an accident.
As someone who bikes a lot in the city, I city bike. I don't have a bike. I city bike, and I only didn't city
Did you
bike
ever
here.
own a bike?
Hmm?
Did you ever own a bike? Yes?
Not in New York. No.
So I used to own a bike, and then the following happened to me twice, and then I just city bike from now. And this is so I was getting like physical therapy for a shoulder or something, so I biked over to the place, and then after I had physical therapy, I walked home because I forgot that I biked over there. And then like 2 or 3 days later, I was like, oh, I need to bike somewhere. Where's my bike? And I was like, oh shit, it's somewhere, but I can't remember where I left it.
Yeah.
So I lost the bike. And then that happened to me twice because I've got like early onset Alzheimer's.
So then you went out and got another bike and did the same thing.
Yeah, but that was like 2 years later. I did the same thing.
City
so,
bike is for you.
So I said city bike.
You should put a tile on that or something.
Well, they didn't have tiles.
No, that's a good point. Well, that's
I could
part of the reason.
pay like a street urchin
That's-
a halfpenny or a
that-
farthing to keep an eye on it.
Yeah, farthing. Yeah.
Yeah, shilling.
Your penny farthing.
There you go, kid.
But no, I mean, I've biked. Well, I guess my city bike app says about 3,500 miles in the city, and
You just made that number
no,
up.
I didn't. I can
How
tell
did you know that?
Because it tells
Oh,
you
yeah.
roughly how. Yeah,
Oh,
the city bike
it
app tells
does?
you like how many rides you have and
Oh.
roughly how many miles you bike.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, but the point is, like, yeah, it's. Look, I know that people are going to turn left or right in front of me. I know that. I know that tourists are not going to be paying attention to the fact that you just stepped into the bike lane.
Right. Have you ever fallen off?
Have I ever fallen off? I've been doored once.
I've never been doored, but I fell on a patch of ice.
I don't bike on patches of ice. That's how you avoid that.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like an intentional choice. I didn't lunge for the patch of ice. I was like, oh, that looks fun.
You like black ice?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't ride when there's black ice.
No, you know.
38 and below, you don't ride.
Oh, no, that's not true. I will definitely ride when it's very cold, but I grew up in Chicago, so I grew up
The windy
It's a
city.
windy city. And so I'm well familiar with driving in winter. And driving in winter is everything's slower, everything's slippery.
Right. No black ice.
Well, there might be. But
It was at night,
it's
it was
hard
at
to
night.
find black ice in New York because as soon as the first flake falls, they're just like salt the shit out of everything.
It's not like a normal amount of salt. It's
Oh,
like
no,
it's a gigantic clump in the intersection.
Truckloads.
Right.
Literal truckloads. And I mean, that's the thing about, I've always been tickled about the
There's like
the
salt
huge
drifts.
demand for, big SUVs and trucks and stuff like that for people that probably could get by with a wagon. Because I need all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive. Why? Well, it snows. And how long is the snow on the ground? Well, not long is the answer because they plow it immediately. I mean, I guess if you live out in the Exurbs or something, it's not plowed immediately. But
Do you know the answer to why people don't like wagons here?
yeah, probably because of the 60s, 70s, and 80s, there was an association with wagons as being the same reason they don't like minivans.
So wagons were associated with like moms picking up their kids?
Yeah. They were
So
associated.
why are they so popular in Europe, do you think? Is it there's not that association?
I think it's a combination of there's not that association and gas is very expensive. Wagons get better mileage.
Do they? Than
Yeah.
than trucks.
Yeah, it's amazing when you make something lighter and smaller.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
This is amazing, man.
I know.
You
Whoa.
you need to come on here on a regular basis.
There's actually, when I
With
came
the-
in, there was a lovely black E39 BMW 528i wagon parked outside, and that's the zenith is how I guess you'd say it.
Yeah.
The zenith of I think BMW's modern design era was the late '90s. They were just on it, and then
Is it thick? Did you poke in? And
I didn't poke it. I
Did you
just
leave it
saw it. I should have to buy personally for myself as a daily, but
you should tell people you're leaving New York.
yeah, I am leaving New York.
Wait, you're giving out?
I guess. Yeah.
Ah, you quitter.
Yeah, it's amazing what having a child does.
Are you going to Hudson?
No,
He's
I'm
going to
not.
Texas.
Go to Texas.
What the
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, my wife's family's from Texas.
What part?
San
Eric's
Antonio.
had to explain this to you. How many times have you had this conversation?
Every time I tell someone this.
They go, why?
Yeah.
You know what? New York is
Well, it's funny because the people
feeling.
that are always like, New York or nowhere, where are you from? I'm from somewhere else.
From Cleveland.
Yeah, because once you've been to New York, then you don't want to be anywhere else. But I will say this: New Yorkers have a strange, there's a strange sense of outrage and betrayal for people who leave. Like, they feel like they feel
Well,
personally
it's
slighted.
outrage, but it's covering it with a twinge of envy.
Yeah, you're right. Because
Yeah.
everyone, I think a lot of.
Oh, you're gonna have like a real house with a yard?
Yeah.
A garage?
Yeah. What's my income tax in New York going to be? In Texas going to be? 0.
Is it zero income tax?
It's a 0 income tax.
Is it massive sales tax?
No.
So how do they? Is it just?
Property tax.
I see.
Shitloads of oil.
Yeah.
And the electric grid is not that good.
Yeah,
electric
they don't
grid's
have
not
to.
that
They don't have
good.
to supply that many people electricity on a
But
regular
you get
basis.
solar because it's sunny all the time.
You
You're
get,
gonna
you get
do
a solar and you get a pistol.
Yeah, as soon as you arrive, when you go to the
Yeah.
DMV to register, so
Here you go, sir.
here's your driver's license and here's your open carry pistol.
Yeah.
Are you gonna do open carry?
No, I'm not gonna open carry. Why?
Because you need one in the, all it takes to stop a bad guy. Is
Well,
Eric
wait, are
Minoff.
you living in the suburbs or like out on a ranch?
I'm living in a city. There's cities in Texas.
I've been to I've seen
Basically, Minoff's
I don't know.
he's getting a set of like
Yeah.
bison fur chaps, and he's gonna live in a wooden shack,
I'm
and
gonna
you're
be
gonna.
a Jewish rancher.
He's gonna be a Jewish mountain man in a flat.
I got about 1,500 head of kosher cattle here.
What's the name of the ranch gonna be called? Like the Twin Payas? What's it gonna be?
Yeah, the Flying J.
Oh, 10 out of 10. That is a 10 out of 10.
Well done, turned off my cap.
Yeah.
I was a bit more obscure with the Twin Payas.
Yeah, no, that would be tough. Plus,
The Flying Foreskin.
you have to buy more letters on the sign.
Yeah.
So Flying J, keep it short.
You're right.
You can get rid of the G, just put an apostrophe. But no, I mean living in San Antonio.
Okay.
7th largest city in the country.
You've got all the factoids.
Yeah,
You know what I like about
right.
people who leave? They always know an unholy amount of factoids about their place they're going, which proves that it's better than New York.
I'm not saying it's better than New York. It's just
Yes,
different
you
than New
are.
York. No, it's not. It's
You just-
not.
well, you
New York
just-
has many. I love New York. I'll be visiting often. But the life changes, and I can also drive a car. Well, I can't really drive in the summer because it's too hot. But the Hill Country has fabulous roads, so I'm very much looking forward to taking advantage of that.
Right. Too hot for you, too hot for
And
the
from a
car.
business perspective, there's a lot of money in Texas, so there's a lot of car people in Texas.
This
That's
is
right.
true. But wait, so what do you have in terms of cars right now? Because you have yourself, a wife, a child,
Yep.
a dog?
No,
No.
it's enough responsibility with the child.
Okay, so you need something that gets 2.5 people around.
Yeah. I mean, this has become a real problem for me. I haven't owned a real car since I lived in San Francisco. When I lived in San Francisco, my real
Frisco.
car, to give you an idea, yes, Frisco, the idea of what my standards for dailies are, I had a 99 Cadillac Sedan DeVille living in San Francisco. Not a driver's car, but very comfortable. I used to go up to the mountains. I mean, what I love about San Francisco is if you don't like the weather, just drive a few hours to another season. So, I would go skiing every weekend because I rented a house with some friends up in Tahoe, and I could fit 3 sets of skis in the trunk closed. And
That's amazing.
I could get chains on and off that Cadillac in 5 minutes flat. And so it was a great car. It was a lot of fun. You take Dramamine if you took it on the twisty roads. But so now I have to buy another daily, and part of me's like, I should get something.
Why don't you get an electric car?
I've thought about that, but I mean, if I there's not an insignificant number of instances where I go and see clients who are maybe 2 or 3 hours away, and I don't have to recharge for half an hour on that route.
Okay.
Or ask them when you get there, hey, mind if I plug in?
Mind if I plug in?
Can I just make this extension cord to your kitchen window?
Yes.
Yes. So what are you gonna?
Well, part of me is like, what I really like is, and everyone can shit on me for this, Buick Regal Tourex. I think it's an Opel Sigma based, wagon.
Why are you getting a Isuzu Vehicross?
I thought it's a 2-seater. It's a 2-door.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love
And
that
it's
car.
incredibly.
But the Buick is an interesting
What?
choice.
It is not.
Oh, no, the
Hang on.
V-Cross is ugly in a beautiful way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
It's super cool because I think it's a very well resolved piece of design in a very odd way.
I think
I like
it's the Pontiac Aztec done well.
Done really well because
Very,
that's a
very
large.
bizarre, very 90s, early 2000s. but it actually.
But it has a definitive design perspective that really works, whereas the Aztec.
Well, the Aztec's a committee. That's the problem with the Aztec.
Yeah.
They had a whole bunch of people designing that.
Wasn't that marketed to like the youth, and they had, you could turn into a tent in the back.
What amazed me about the Aztec is
Jacuzzi.
it came out as a concept, and everyone's like, "Oh, that is terrible," and GM's like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna build it."
But I feel like there's a lot of examples of that happening, no?
Not as many, I think.
But
But they come up with a concept where they debut a concept and they're like, "What do you all think?" And everyone's like, "It's awful," and then they go, "Okay, we'll build it then." Think of another one.
You know what I was thinking about the other day, and this is slightly unrelated. It's Chrysler in the 90s, where just everyone there was just taking a shitload of mushrooms. Because they made so many amazing, like the Prowler.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
That's an insane car to build.
Yeah, how was that a production car? Even the PT Cruiser was kind of crazy and unusual.
Two words: Bob Lutz.
That's right, maximum Lutz.
Yeah. I think
That's an amazing name.
if you have that, and I mean, it's a brilliant idea. It's just it's the Halo car.
What, the Prowler?
The Prowler, the Viper, the Ford GT. Yeah, they're not targeting their
Sure.
primary audience when they come out with these. They're targeting people
what I saw
who
the
are
other
going to
day?
come and buy a regular car.
Right, it gets you in the
dealer
door
wants
to
to
the
have it
dealer.
on the floor.
Yeah.
You know what I saw the other day was that reimagined Thunderbird.
Oh yeah, the one that's based on the Crown Vic from the
Yeah, and
early
maybe,
2000s.
and I know this is weird, but I feel like it's not terrible except for the wheels.
And it's
Is that
a driving
weird?
experience.
I mean-
I think it's a great looking car. They did a
Yeah.
great job designing it. It's just a very boring car to drive.
But a lot of people got those and then parked them thinking it was going to be a collectible.
Right.
Anyone who buys a car as an investment solely, you're probably not going to make money on it.
Do you? No, wait a minute.
If you buy it as an investment and you think I'm buying this as an investment,
But come on, there's a certain category of cars that, like if you buy a McLaren F1,
if you
if
bought
you buy
it,
a De Tomaso Guerra,
if
I mean,
you
you're
bought it-
just guaranteed to make millions.
the thing is, if you buy it thinking I'm going to make money on it, you probably won't. If you buy it thinking this is a great car, I love it, it's awesome,
Really? You think if you think if I went out and bought an F1, if I had the folding to buy one, money, you don't think that, I mean, even if I would love to own that car just to own it and drive it, but as an investment, I feel like
I think your return is going to exceed that of any other, investment.
Well, that's impossible to say.
Well,
But I would certainly, and I don't think you can't make that statement because you don't know what the market's going to do. You don't know
Well,
anything.
You don't
It's
know
also
what the market's
hard
going to
to
do.
do
But
cars.
the thing is, there's a couple things. First off, carrying costs are very high.
Right.
You have to maintain it.
Yeah,
You have to
this is
store
cheap.
it. You have to
Minor key.
you have to insure it. And then is it going to go up in value? It might.
Do you think that? Oh, here's a question for you.
But if you look at if you had bought a McLaren F1 in 2001, you would have 20 times what you paid.
Sure. What were they going for then? Like 2 or 3 million, right?
Oh,
No less.
under.
About a million to $1.5 million.
Wow.
Yeah. But you'd have all of your cost each year that would not be insignificant.
Sure.
So you have to build all this in, and once you built all this in, as an investment, again, if you're looking at purely as an investment,
When you're talking about long term.
long term or short, I mean, there's a lot of people who want to make just short term flips.
Short-term
But
flipping you can do
you're-
still.
If you're still looking at purely as an investment, you miss why people are buying cars. Which
Okay,
is
so let's just say, just out of interest.
because they enjoy the experience of cars, and when you turn them into a pure asset class, it makes them very boring because they are kind
Well,
of
look,
living, breathing things. They're things you drive and enjoy, and I mean, one of the things I think is very interesting about especially modern car collecting is the fact that there's this big emphasis on it's got no mileage. It's like wine collecting now.
Right.
Right.
We talk about cars as this new Bugatti Koenigsegg Ferrari, whatever it is. It can go 0 to 60 in blah blah blah. It can have
Right.
top
But
speed
it's
of
never been
this.
driven.
It's all been handmade. Everything's this, that, and the next thing, and it's got 50 miles on it. This is like
Do you
going
think
to a
that's
friend's
because-
house. They pull out a bottle of Chateau Lafite. This is amazing stuff. The juice in this bottle is spectacular. It's really amazing stuff. We'll put this bottle right back on the rack and never drink it.
But let me ask you this: I feel like the low mileage thing is a kind of an American thing versus European thing. Do you think that's wrong?
I mean, there's tax laws in Europe that are changing that, which is to say that modern cars with, I can't remember the mileage, but it's not an insignificant number, under a certain amount of mileage, I think 5,000 or 10,000 kilometers or something like that, are full VAT.
Oh, so if you have more mileage, you pay less.
Correct.
So they incentivize you to actually use the damn thing.
But
I don't think it's necessarily that. It's more so that, look, if you can afford it, you can afford it. But usually in Europe, you pay VAT on service for a car, which means that if you buy it at auction, for example, you're paying VAT on the buyer's premium. Whereas if you are buying a Ferrari F50 that has 1,000 kilometers on it, you're paying VAT on the full purchase price, and that's 20%. So that's a big whack. That's a big amount.
I didn't
of money.
realize that. But I do feel that seems, and maybe look, you have a much better view of these things. But I do feel like a mileage thing is a greater obsession here than is elsewhere. Like the low
To some
mileage
extent, I think that's partly because of the cultural differences between Europeans, Brits, and Americans. Europeans drive a lot more. You look at the types of events they hold,
Sure.
and they drive their cars a lot more, all of their cars.
And they drive them like crazy people. Like
Yeah.
at Goodwood, you see those the vintage races. I mean, they're just banging into each other.
He didn't hit you.
Yeah.
He rubbed you. Rubbing is racing. Yeah.
It's amazing
the
to watch
level
those things.
of competitive driving. But even if you go on like a rally,
Right.
the rallies are still, a lot of time, distance, speed rallies. They're actually competing.
Right.
And sometimes they're competing really intensely, like in Tour Auto in France.
Yeah.
That's like a very, very serious event. And, these men and women are very, very good at it.
Yeah.
And they're excellent drivers and they drive very hard. In the United States, you think of the major rallies, you
Right.
think of like the
Colorado,
Colorado Grand and
It's more of a leisurely stroll.
yeah, and it's like 200-300 miles a day, and then you stop several times for luxurious meals, and you stay at a really nice hotel,
Right.
and it's not that
You're not
intense
hammering.
driving.
Yeah, you're not hammering.
And it's also, I think, in part because the density of the roads and the road design. Driving around a supercar in Florida, for example, that would put me to sleep.
Right.
The most fun you're going to have is an off-ramp in one place. Otherwise, it's like dead straight and flat.
Right.
Whereas Europe has, for the most part, topography, or at least the roads curve and move and
Right. There are
give you
hills.
something to do.
Right.
So there's definitely a difference, and it's not to say, again, stereotypes do not apply to everyone always. There are lots of people who I know who have modern cars, modern supercars, and they drive them a lot. But, with modern
Or
cars...
even old cars. Yale, who was on the podcast a week ago, he drives his cars. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of thousands.
Tools, not tools. I mean, I've put on, since 2014, about 20,000 miles on my Motorcar.
Sure.
So, the reality of it is that, everyone's different, but with old cars, you have typically smaller production numbers, and because the cars are of a certain age, you can basically maintain them to be nice, and you can just drive them, and there's less relevance as to, and I'm not saying there's no relevance to originality, there definitely is, but there's still value to a car that has been driven and then restored and well kept. Whereas modern cars, typically the production numbers are much higher, and every single one of them is exactly the same except for colors, maybe options, and the only thing you can control after the car is left the factory is the mileage.
Right.
So that's the one thing that you have agency over, and as a result, that has become a major factor in the value of modern cars. Now, again, we're seeing, these cars that come up for market with very few miles. Those are the ones we're seeing sold publicly, and the reason you see them keep selling is because if a car has miles, the person is using it and enjoying it, and they probably want to keep it.
Right.
And this is not exclusive to like a Bugatti Veyron or something. Look at Ferrari F40s. How many F40s come to market with like 15,000 miles on them? Basically none.
No,
Right.
it's always like 2,500.
And why is that? Because the guy that has 15,000 or more miles on his car, he's driving it, he's enjoying it, he's enjoying the ownership experience to the extent that he doesn't want to sell it. Whereas the guy that never drives his car probably will not enjoy the car as much, and also considers it more of an asset, and so they're going to be trading more often.
Right.
So you can buy an ultra low mileage car much more easily than a higher mileage car. You're going to pay for it because you're
I always find
someone's preserved it.
I find that low mileage is an albatross. I don't like it because first of all it means that the car's never been maintained. It most likely hasn't been serviced in the way it should be serviced. And then also, as you say, because that mileage has value, is a currency. When you add mileage when you drive it, then you're devaluing your car in something. So I'd much rather buy a car with like 30,000 miles.
Oh,
For sure.
I am a purveyor of product and an arbiter of taste.
That's right.
I am more than, when I go to see a car, I look at the car and I will give you my sense of where I think the car should be best offered at what value. And that's based on markets, based on trends, based on a lot of different things. Do I personally want to own that car? Don't ask me.
Yeah, I get
My
it. You have to
opinion
be-
of what the car,
agnostic.
my opinion of wanting the car is not relevant because I'm not buying it.
So what are the cars that are sort of super hot now at auction? That you see the car, you're like, oh, I can sell this in 2 seconds.
I mean, again, it really comes down to value.
The Tomaso Guerra.
Yeah, Guara. We have one coming up.
One of the
July-
50.
July 3rd.
Is it a
in
coupe
Switzerland.
or a barchetta?
It's a coupe.
What color? Is it blue? Purple.
Oh no, I've seen
Purple.
I've seen the listing for this one.
Yeah,
It's actually a really good looking
like
car.
purple.
Purple. You know how sometimes you say words and then the more you say it, the weirder it sounds.
Yeah, purple.
But then if you say it in English, purple.
This is why
Wait, what were you saying it in previously?
Because he was saying
in
purple.
my American accent,
Eric-
whereas if you say it in a erudite English accent, which
Say
is
it.
why the English always sounds smarter.
That's all I got going for me.
Yeah.
So wait, purple.
Purple or purple?
Purple. You're like putting a purr.
Yeah, it's like a cat. There's a cat in there.
Yeah. Wanting to get out.
Wait, what?
So there's a violet colored.
Yeah,
Wow.
there's also a Maserati. Is it Maserati bi-turbo Spider or something? It's the one that it's red and it has no roof or windshield.
Yeah, that was the Barchetta. That's
the Barchetta.
Yeah,
the
so
Barchetta.
that's
we have one of those too.
Yeah, so the Guara basically, the Tomaso took that and he took that whole design. They're basically the same car.
Yeah, except the De Tomaso is much better because it has a reliable German power
Is it?
plant.
Oh, interesting. So what's the estimate?
I can't remember.
Oh, come on, man.
Is it the Stad sale?
It's Stad. Yes.
Stad. Do you watch Stad guy on Instagram?
I do occasionally.
It's great. Wait, come on, man. You don't want to tell me the estimate because it's disappointingly, it's sad. Like 10,
No, I
10 to 12 grand.
literally can't. Hundreds of cars a year we sell.
No, if you remember
I
everything.
can't remember every
Hold on
estimate.
the site. I'm gonna find it.
What's the?
It's not even on the auction highlights. The Guara didn't
I
make
see.
the
There's
cut.
is that an SZ?
There is
No.
an S. I think there's an SC in there. Yeah.
I do love the SZ. Oh, it's Lero.
Yeah, it's Lero S. The rear.
Oh, that's cool.
Delicious.
That's an amazing bit of design. You know what I loved about Lamborghini in the 70s is they were doing. Actually, you know what they were doing? They were doing what Hyundai is doing now.
Yeah, they were.
Because hang on, let me finish that. So Hyundai is not saying they're not doing what Audi does, which is all cars look the same. They're making every car different. And Lamborghini did it in the 70s. It was amazing. When you think about their line, they had the Miura, they had the
Contact, as you would call it.
is it what?
All my English friends and colleagues say contact, which is
They
kind
do.
of inappropriate. Yeah, contact.
Oh, Countach. I didn't know that's how they
No, I
say it.
have heard
Countach
British people get it wrong.
is Lero, which is I think has always been a very that to me that's a design that
It's
is
a very
aged.
crisp design.
Yeah, it's beautifully aged. The Espada didn't they have the LM002 at the same time?
That was in the 80s.
Okay. Oh shit, I've shamed myself. What else? They had the Uraco. Have I left anything out? But those are all 4 or 5 or 6 really disparate looking from a design standpoint.
They were very different looking, and I think one of the things that the Countach especially, and the Mura to an extent as well. It is so breaking the mold, and we forget that. That is that's a car that today it's like, wow, that's kind of cool looking. Yeah, but think about it in 1971 when it came out.
Sure.
As a concept, like this thing dropping. This doesn't look like anything on the road. I mean, it is.
That's why I was so enraged when they redid the Countach, because it was because to me, I felt like, as you say, when they did the original Countach, it was a radical idea, right? And it looked, like you say, like nothing on the road. And I feel like they should have taken that idea of looking like nothing on the road and done something. And I think they really sullied that name by making like a kit car version.
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the problems with coming out with sort of a modern reinterpretation of a historic design is, you've got this spectacular, iconic thing, and then you're going to reissue it.
Well, that's the thing. They should.
And to your point, the way they modernized it just kind of made it look more modern. But because now supercars look like what the Countach looked like originally,
right,
it doesn't stand out as much. But it's part of a trend that I find very amusing, which is coming out with a tribute to a prior famous model that is appreciated wildly in value, but this tribute is a multiple of the cost of the car it is tributing.
Right.
So like the new Countach.
What's that go for, the new Countach then?
It's like 2 plus 2.5 million.
And what's a real Countach go for?
700 to $1.1 million.
It's amazing.
$1.2 million. They've come off their peaks.
Do you know what
they were more, and they've kind of come. They're difficult to drive for any period of time because you're in a rather uncomfortable pain position.
Yeah.
But the design-wise is so cool.
You know
the
that
vertical odometer and the huge windshield and everything. And then like the Bugatti, the Centradice or Cento, the 110 Tribute that they've come out with based on the Chiron.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that.
That's like triple the price of a EV110 SS.
Right. Have you ever seen that? Was that Japanese guy designed he took an Aventador or something, and it was called the Code 01.
Code Brown.
That's my constant state when I'm driving anything on. I'm in a constant state of Code Brown. The brown trouser light is flashing. No, it's a Code 01. You know what I'm talking about? It's a Japanese guy who redesigned it.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. That to me is really like, I thought that's an amazing piece of design.
Yeah.
And it's, I think it's silver. That's it.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then, but look on the inside, that when you open the door, on the door jams that you spread on toast, it's green, and the outside silver. He's done some really interesting things.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like generally speaking that car makers don't take the experiments they used to.
Right.
But they're also the costs are much higher.
I take a very cynical view of all that stuff, the reissues. It's like Omega constantly reissuing Speedmasters. I feel like these are just marketing ideas. They're just ways to make more money. Whereas the Countach was, I mean, I guess you could say it was, but
Well, these
it was
companies,
audacious though.
They're all owned by
VW.
Well, yeah.
Actually.
I mean, they're, a lot of them are, unless you're talking about Morgan, they're beholden to shareholders.
Right.
And why not take the safe road? You're going to sell the reissue.
You don't know
if you're going to sell the totally wild out of this world thing. And there's a huge amount of marketing currency towards these famous models.
It's it's a movie franchise marketing idea.
Absolutely.
That's all. We did Batman. That was a success. We're just going to keep doing Batman.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Rather than coming out with a new John Hughes movie, we'll just come out with sequels.
Right.
Ferris Bueller takes another day off.
Breakfast Club, Brunch Club, Lunch Club,
Lunch Club,
Tea Club.
Yeah. No, I mean it's the market's very diverse, obviously.
Right.
But I mean, like I said, I will sell anything as long as it has value. But I find the older cars a lot more interesting because people tend to drive them, use them, and enjoy them more so than the modern cars. And I guess the other thing is,
if you could have here's the old chestnut. If you could have one car, what would it be?
if I could have one car,
One car, what would
I feel like you need to say it with a little more enthusiasm.
Because I feel like that's a boring question, but I'm kind of interested because you expose.
Yeah, I take an Alpha 8C, not the modern one, the original one from the 30s.
I find the modern one a little too plump.
I mean, it's a rare example of a rare modern car. They didn't build very many.
No, I know, but when I
relative
saw it in pictures, I thought this looks amazing. When I saw it in person, I felt like, oh, it's had too many burgers.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably better looking than the car it's based on. So,
What was it based on?
Maserati 200.
Did you just get depressed?
No,
Talking about it.
saying what it was based on. It was based on the Maserati 200.
Well, we didn't get many of them over here, and then
Well, that was because they had this weird brand on the front of them.
right, but also
Alfa Romeo. Heard of that?
But
Is
a lot
that
of-
a new company?
but a lot of people didn't drive them, and then Glickenhaus up north used his as like a commuter car at the train station.
Yeah, we sold that car.
Did you?
Perfect example. So it was paint to sample.
What color was it?
It was like a special red. It didn't look
Okay,
paint
so
to
it's
sample.
paint to
Well,
sample.
it's paint to sample to make it look like a color that's very common. His had like 40-something thousand miles on it.
So what did that go for?
It went for a pretty fair amount of money. I mean, look, most of them are selling for $300,000-$400,000 because they have very few miles. This one sold for 2-something, but I mean, look, he got to enjoy 40, nearly 50,000 miles out of it. So is that worth $100,000? Probably. And more importantly, the new owner can drive the beans out of it.
Yep.
Right.
Like the best Ferrari F50 I think I've ever sold was a black one of I think 3. And it was unique in 2 ways. First off, it had been totaled in the late 90s when it wasn't worth anything, sent back to Ferrari. And when you get in an accident in a carbon fiber car, it's different than when you get in an accident in a car with metal. Because carbon fiber you don't fix, you replace. So there was no way to see what had happened to it because there was no evidence of repair, they just replaced.
Right.
So it had all been redone, and it had 66,000 miles on it.
So just
That's
do you know?
perfect.
Do you
And
know?
the guy who bought it, he bought it in Arizona. He picked it up and drove it back to California.
It's great.
And he's driven a lot. And you know what? Mileage is irrelevant on that because it's got a salvage title.
What did that go for?
It went for like at the time I think, and this was 4 or 5 years ago.
Oh, before they were a thing.
I mean, they were a thing, but not a thing.
Right.
I want to say it sold for like $1.5 million or something.
Right.
Which was at the time maybe 30-40% less than a nicer lower mileage example.
Right.
I mean,
What do you go for now?
depending on condition, mileage, and if it's an American or European spec car, about 2 million, give or take 500 on either side.
Okay.
I would much rather have the salvage title black, 66,000.
There's a car that looks terrible in red, I think.
My favorite Ferrari color is not red. Sometimes you don't have a choice. F40s only came in red.
No, I know. What did they make? I thought they made. Oh no, that's right. That's right.
Painted.
No, I know. But every time I see an F40, like Joel's green, or there's that geezer in England who has the blue one. Every time I see any other car, I think this car looks
Bonhams
amazing.
also sold the blue one on the market, Bonhams.com.
As a matter of fact.
Website.
Good plug. Good plug.
Slipped it in there. Finally, you can take that off. But every time I see one of those in a non-red, I think that then you can see how cool the car is.
Well, the thing that tickles me the most is, so the Salt and the Brunei had a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
And he painted them all sorts of different colors, and he had Testarossa interiors put in them. So leather, power windows.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And one of them got sold out of the collection. It was like a pewter gray with the red stripes
Oh,
where
I've
the
seen
black.
I've seen that one.
Yeah. Okay. It was
Beautiful.
taken to DK Engineering and restored back to dead stock original.
Really?
Which, I mean, it look, one of the weird things about collector cars versus collector anything else is with collector anything else, like take watches. If you have a watch and you're like, you know what, I prefer to change the watch to make it look different, have a different face put on and all that, or if you have a painting, you're like, you know,
I don't like the fruit in this still. Like, I want to have strawberries.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
oranges.
Yeah, she's wearing a blue dress. I'd rather be a red dress.
Right.
Like, you can't change it. That's just the way it is. And if you change, if you do change it, that's fine. But now it's worth nothing.
Right.
Whereas with cars, you can restore it, you can can make it look however you want. You know, you want to change.
Well, particularly if it's in the Sultan Brunei, that's all done in the factory.
It's not done at the factory.
It's not done.
No, it's done by Pininfarina.
That's almost
But
as good.
it's almost, but it is not. And so, you know, this was a left-right swap, so it was right-hand drive because his cars were all right-hand drive.
Right.
And it was pewter, and it had a gray leather interior, and it was restored back to red,
Right.
with the cloth interior and everything.
Did they swap it back to left-hand drive as well?
Yeah. And here's the best part. After doing all that, another guy bought it, and he's restoring it back.
No.
It's a pewter with leather.
Yeah. And
That's the good guy.
And you know.
So wait, when it was restored back to original, was it worth
When you
more
say
or less?
original,
Well, sorry, when it was
which are
restored
we
back,
talking about?
when it was restored from Sultan Brunei back to F40 regular, did it lose value or gain value?
You know, I don't think it would have gained value because an enormous amount of value, especially in modern cars, is on originality.
Sure.
And the paint's not original, the interior's not original. And I've had people that will not buy an F40 because they think the seats have been recovered.
Right.
Or the paint is not perfect. These things are painted with what amounts to watercolors, and it's made of Kevlar and carbon fiber, and it flexes. I don't care how many miles are on it, the paint's going to crack. And I'm not talking about big cracks, but micro.
But you also need to be able to see the weave.
You see the weave because the paint's shit. That's the honest truth. Is why you see the weave. You know,
Right.
and you know if you don't have those. And again, it's.
So was it worth? So do you think? Because to me,
I don't think it was worth anything.
To me,
more.
I think it would be worth more to have an original Sultan Brunei car that was done by Pininfarina. That would be interesting because they all look the same. This one doesn't, but it was a Pininfarina thing, not like some body shop in Queens.
Yeah. So personally, if I was valuing it, yes, I would consider the Sultan Brunei example to have been worth more. Now, if I'm valuing it though, as an auction estimate. That's the kind of thing where you really and this is where it's not science, it's a little bit of Harry Potter magic. I'm thinking about how I want to value it. I wouldn't want to value it, top market. I would, because I think it'll probably sell for a lot more than it realistically should. I would bet that if you'd taken that car and not done anything to it, left it as the Sultan Brunei had it, and you offered it in the UK, and you put a lower estimate on it because it's not a correct F40, it's a modified F40. I know that it was modified by the right people, but it's modified.
Right.
If you put a feet on the ground estimate on it, it would probably sell for a price at or above what a very nice unmodified example.
That's what I would imagine.
But if you were to put an estimate on it that was up at the price of that unmodified example, you're probably going to price out the market. And a lot of people who would have shown up and fought each other for it might not necessarily come and do that.
I would love to have something like that because what's interesting about that is it's all a question of who are the people who did the modifications. Mm-hmm. And that's what to me makes it like there's a gulf of a difference between Pininfarina doing it and some random place.
Oh, totally.
And to me, the Pininfarina thing is equally as is completely kosher.
Yeah, I mean. Ferrari people are in some ways like Porsche people in that there's only one place that can do things right, and that is the manufacturer. Right. And especially in Ferrari's case, the manufacturer takes huge advantage of this because we sold a 250 GTO in 2014, and the car, it was unique in that it was the only 250 GTO that someone had been killed racing in. It was in a bad accident. And it hit a building, and it was kind of L-shaped. Look, it was a race car at the time. This was in 1964 or 5. Right. So it was sent back and fixed. Now, the body was not salvageable. So they had this shop make a new body for it. Scaglietti, I don't know if you've heard of it.
Sure.
So it had a Scaglietti body on it. Well, Ferrari wouldn't give a Classic A to it because it had a repop body. So they would, to give a Classic A, they would require you have a new body made by their craftsman, which is a shop down the street, not Ferrari themselves. They outsource their restoring. But which is the original body? The Scaglietti built one in period, or the modern one that Ferrari has spritz the holy water on. And this is a kind
also,
of.
but the thing that's interesting about that is in the 50s and 60s there were all sorts of coach builders putting stuff on, and that's never. Does that affect?
It depends on the car. It always depends on the car. I mean, if you're talking about cars where there is a profit motive by a manufacturer to engage with the car, which in Ferrari they're making a lot of money on the Classic A program and they want to maintain that.
Sure.
It sometimes changes the they're an interested party there.
Right.
No one's going to necessarily throw up. They're not going to get angry about it if it's a Packard or a Cadillac or something like that,
right?
Because Cadillac has no vested interest in the originality or verifying the originality of its previously produced vehicles. They'll send you a build sheet. They have phenomenal records. Shout out to the GM Heritage Center. They've done a great job of preserving that for Cadillac.
Right.
And you can get a build sheet on any Saturn that was built if you want one.
Wow.
Just out of interest though, when we're talking about all this Ferrari stuff, it makes me think of the Glickenhaus P45 and how that got the sign off from Ferrari, didn't it?
It did. I think
how did that happen? That was miraculous.
When did that happen?
I don't know.
It happened when the car was built, 2004 or something?
Okay.
How much was the Classic A at that time?
Nothing.
$5,000,
Right.
$3,500. I mean, it has become so much more of an element of Ferrari's business plan that they have.
What does it cost to get your car certified by a Classic A now from Ferrari?
Depends on the value of the car.
So how does that work? Say,
Yeah, it's a sliding scale.
Okay, so for instance,
that little red book.
I had a 240 Dino, right?
Yeah.
So, which is now worth whatever, like 260 grand, 400 grand, I don't know,
Yeah.
300 grand. You tell me. Oh,
So how much more movie in here?
I think it's a.
No,
We're not be more Italian when we speak, right? So how would that? You don't have to send the car, do you?
You would have to take it to a
Center.
authorized Classic A
Okay.
certification center. So in this case, it'd be like Miller Motor Cars.
Okay, and then what does that cost them to? What do they charge you? 10 grand,
It
50
depends
grand?
on how much of the car is original, quote unquote.
I like the quote unquote.
So if let's just say that all they have to do is inspect it and there's nothing that needs to be replaced
Right.
or repaired or restored. You'd probably be looking down the barrel of a $5,000 to $15,000 bill.
And then what does that add for value at auction to say it's Classic A, whatever, certified?
It's hard to necessarily put a number on it, but I put it this way, and maybe this is a little pessimistic, but when people are buying a car at auction, they're looking sometimes for reasons not to put their hand in the air a second time, or a third time, or a 10th time.
Oh, so it's not Classic A, then that's a use.
So if the car is Classic A certified, it's not that you can't get it Classic A certified. You could do it, you just have to spend the time and money to do it. But if it's already done, it's one less thing I have to worry about.
Right.
And yeah, you know what? It's been spritzed with the holy water. It's blessed. Comes with this fancy red book with its number stamped on it. I'll put my hand here.
Right.
So it's something that it's difficult to necessarily put a figure on.
I understand what you mean though. You want to lube the path to victory, as it were.
It certainly helps. It doesn't hurt.
Right, okay.
And people want.
I have to say, man.
Ferrari people want a Classic A, but it's at a certain level. There's a level where if you have like a Testarossa,
Right.
the Classic A isn't going to have as much of an effect on value.
I
Because
accept.
those cars are so well documented as they are, and there's so few of them. It's not like, oh, is this a real one? Everyone knows every single thing about every single Testarossa that was ever built.
Right. I have to say, man, I find the whole thing kind of vaguely depressing. Because it's like you say, it's the monetization of the hobby. It's the aestheticization, if that's a word, of the hobby.
Commoditization.
Commoditization is probably a better word. It's probably a real word that I should use. But it all
There's
kind
an
of.
ass at the beginning of it.
I know. Well, it's tempting. But it just sort of makes it all, I mean, basically, anyone who collects anything, it's a nerdy pastime, right?
Yeah.
And like you collect watches, you collect cars, whatever. It's because part of you is kind of an inner nerd, like you like the thing, you like the history, you like the way it looks, whatever it is. And that's sort of, in some ways, and I guess this is a bit geezer, these things, but I feel like that's being squeezed out a little bit. And some areas of the market, not all of it.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. Look, the car market, you can still engage at any value point.
Sure.
If you've got $5,000 to spend on a car, you can get a great car from any era. You're not going to be able to get
A TT, original TT.
You can get an original
I love
TT.
I love those.
But you could get a workable Model T if you want something from the teens, 20s. You know, you can get a workable Model A. You know, you can get.
You should take this moment to tell people about your hot rods. He had the crazy. I mean, Minoff, if you're not watching the YouTube show, is a civilized, urbane-looking gentleman with red frame glasses. Not the kind of gent you would think would be buying like a crazy hot rod with a chopped cabin.
It wasn't chopped; it was channeled and had been dropped
What's
on
the
the
difference
frame.
in channel and chop?
So the three primary modifications in the hot rod are chopped, channeled, and section.
Okay.
Chopped is where you lower the roof line, so you cut the A, B,
Yeah.
and C pillars and drop the top of the roof line. Channeled is where you drop the body on the frame, so the body remains unchanged,
But the whole thing
is lower.
Okay.
It has a lower look to it. And sectioned is where you cut a strip out of the length of the body and you lessen the width of the height of the bodywork.
Okay.
The car I had was built by a guy named Alexis DuPont, who was the son of E. Paul DuPont, who was the founder of DuPont Motors. So there's he was the former owner of Indian Motorcycle. But yeah, he was 6'2", so that's why he didn't chop it; it wouldn't fit.
Right, but also this is the son of presumably a billionaire, one of the greatest
American
fortunes, industrial fortunes, making a hot rod.
Well,
do you think it was like I'm going to piss off my father kind of situation?
No, at the time he was racing a lot of.
When was this in the 60s?
This was in the 50s. He was racing a lot of Norton-powered Coopers, which we really don't have here in the United States because no one would race a 500cc race car.
Right.
But in Europe, in Goodwood, you see people racing these, and they're open wheel race cars. They use a Norton Manx engine,
As one does.
which is a 500cc single, and so he was racing these, and he wanted a kind of get around truck, and he hill climbed with it, so it had a roll bar in it.
But when you look at it, it's like kind of like a mushroom-induced Beverly Hillbillies.
Well, it was
psychomobile.
It's
crazy.
A rat rod is when you make a hot rod look like it's all beat up.
Right.
This was just the way it was.
Right.
I mean, I had pictures of it from when he built it. And it had a Scott supercharged flathead V8 with the biggest Scott supercharger you could buy, which I think was 2.4 liters. It was a big blower. And the limiting factor in the speed of the car, it also had, twin car manifold on it, and it had all sorts of neat, like aeronautical gauges, because you were big into planes too. It's what you do when you have unlimited money. It was just something that someone built in the 50s the way you would have built in the 50s. The seats were out of a 49 Volkswagen, things like that. And that's why I liked it.
But why? This is just so.
But it was definitely not me. I mean,
it seems very unminoff to buy that car.
The top speed I could get to in it was about 75, and that was not because it was running out of power. It was because it had struts in the front, which it wouldn't have had originally. We had just leaf springs. But it had struts in the front, and there was a melodic motion that would start at about 75, where the front wheels would vibrate because there was still a transverse leaf spring, and that was sending the vibrations between the two wheels. So I probably could have replaced the struts to get that to stop and continued on, because there was plenty of revs back in your left there to continue going, which for a 1934 Ford, that's a pickup.
But what made you buy that car? I mean,
the history was so cool,
right.
and it was very period, and I like the fact it was so period.
You bought it as an investment. You knew I could
if
buy
it
this
was
car
an
and
investment,
sell it for millions.
This is my problem. See, I'm very good at selling cars for people. I'm very bad at selling cars for me. I think I didn't make money on it, I'll tell you that much.
Didn't you go in on a car? Didn't you buy a
I did buy a Montreal with Bradley.
Yeah, with Bradley.
And we drove to Montreal for the 50th anniversary of the release of the Montreal in Montreal. That's what we told the customs person to.
Did that work all the way? Did it happen?
Fuck yeah, it did.
Really?
Drove it all the way up there, drove it all the way back. Worked like a charm.
No,
Wonderful.
really?
Yeah. It was a special it was an Alfa Romeo Club meet, and 2017 50th anniversary release of the original Montreal concept at the Expo 67, and the Montreal was the featured model. I think there were like 8 that showed up. We were the only one that drove there. And then on the little tour they had, 2 of the cars broke down, which I don't want to scare people away from Montreal. It's a highly underrated car. I think it's phenomenal value for the money.
What do they go for now?
Oh, they're anywhere from kind of 60 to 90 grand,
Right.
which is GTV money now, which is kind of crazy. But a GTV has half as many cylinders, but then again, half as
You
many
got to get the
problems.
Montreal in either bronze or that green.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't want it in red, but that's the color of the car we had. But if it is serviced right, it is an amazing touring car. It's not a sports car. It's like a Citroen SM. It's not a sports car. It's a touring car. But oh man, that thing just so much power. It was so great, and no one knew what the hell it was. But a very cool machine.
I love those designs, man.
Yeah, it was. I think it was a little bit limited by the fact that it was built off of a shorter wheelbase. The wheelbase needed to be longer, not necessarily for handling, but the overhangs were too long.
Right.
But it's a very cool car, so I highly recommend it
To people.
generally.
Generally.
But yeah, I mean, it's the market does not value cars based on necessarily how they drive or how good they are as a car, how successful they are, competitively.
But that also can change. That's what I love about particularly modern cars, and I've made a bit of a career buying cars that have been obscured by mythology, and then eventually that mythology disappears and is replaced by another mythology.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But I find that interesting that there are cars that have stories that follow them that people just repeat, almost like a religion, like a mantra. They just repeat, well, it should have been this, should have been that. But eventually the car emerges from that kind of cloud, that nimbus cloud of bullshit.
Yeah.
And people see it for the thing that it is.
Well, I mean, look, the beauty of the car market is that it's always changing.
Right.
And, in the last 20, 30 years, we've left the pure nostalgia market. And the car market's very young. You look at the art market. Art market's been around since, art was not affixed to a cave wall. And the car market, though, cars have only been a going thing since like the 1880s. So, we're at 140 years of the car market. And and it continues to be the strongest motivating factor in the market is nostalgia collecting. People want what they remember as a kid. So the first thing most people buy as a collector is going to be the thing they have on their wall when they were 15 years old. So there's about a 35-year trailing average, which is to say that it takes about 35 years to go from being a zit-faced teenager to having enough time, money, and wherewithal to go out and buy that car you really wanted as a kid. So that's why cars from the 80s and 90s are becoming very valuable now, is because people are now chasing after these things that formerly no one cared about because they were just used cars. And there's become a much greater acceptance of, for example, Japanese cars, because the outgoing generation of collectors, they didn't like Japanese cars, just as the previous generation before them didn't like European cars, because European cars were like chintzy little, imports like Volkswagens.
Right.
And then Japanese cars were chintzy little imports like Corollas. But the opinions that people have of these cars change. If you ask a younger person what they think of Japanese cars, they'll be like, oh, they're pretty nice cars, they're very reliable. They're who wouldn't want to, like a Lexus is a nice car, an Acura NSX is a spectacular machine. And
The new one?
Well, the original one, but I mean, the NSX is still an impressive vehicle.
Okay, I would say it's impressive from a technology standpoint.
Yeah,
from a
but
design standpoint, it's very unimpressive.
It is not. I think that was where they hiccuped, is they didn't divorce themselves from the mold as much as they did with the NSX.
Right.
but the original NSX, I should say. But the point is, like, there's this acceptance of things that previously were not considered valuable. But that's not to say that the things that are older, that fall outside of the nostalgia collecting, aren't now valuable. People collect them for different reasons. And if you look at pre-war cars, for example, people who were collecting for nostalgia reasons collected cars that were the most expensive to buy. What was the most expensive pre-war car? That would have been like body style, because that's the biggest factor in value. Because you could get, for the most part, you get any pre-war car with any body you wanted. And the drivetrain and the architecture of the chassis was the same, it was just what's on top. The most expensive ones would have been an open drive limousine. So open drive limousine is worth a lot of money. Well, the problem with an open drive limousine is the guy driving it is paid to drive it. And someone with a lot of money doesn't necessarily want to pay a lot of money to have a car that someone else is paid to drive when they now own the car and the pride is in driving the car. So there's been a shift away from, and I'm not saying exclusively, but now people want like two-door roadsters, for pre-war cars. And the values of some of them, like Duesenbergs, have gone way up, way beyond what they previously were. We're now seeing Duesenbergs sell for prices that they never previously sold. Now, maybe if you inflation adjust it, it's equivalent to what they were selling for in the 80s. But the point is, when people were buying in the 80s, there was nostalgia collective. The Duesenberg was 50 years old. People who were kids could now afford to spend as much money as they wanted to, and were buying these things.
So what are they buying? Who's buying a Duesenberg now if it's not nostalgia?
Well, it's because the Duesenberg was the most powerful and one of the most powerful and technologically advanced cars of its time. When you think about so the Duesenberg came out the J, I should say, came out in 28, built through 36. Unsupercharged, it had 265 horsepower, and supercharged, it had 320. It could do 120 miles an hour. And we have to remember that these power figures are horsepower. Torque was a much bigger factor, and also gas was garbage. There was not the regulation we have on gas. They didn't have 93 octane gas. They had 60 octane.
Right.
So these things were running on rot gut, and they could still make enormous amounts of power. And now, 265 horsepower in 1929.
Sure.
That's still a lot of power.
Right.
So it's a spectacular car, and so people are, and when I say younger people are collecting them, younger people in the car hobby, I'm not talking about people in their 20s, I'm talking about people in their 50s and 60s, which is young for the for the collecting hobby.
Right.
The reality is you need three things to collect cars: space, money, and passion. We need a fourth too, which is time, because you want to use them. And most people have passion in spades, always, but they might not have space, money, and time until they're a bit more advanced in their life, which is why you see at auctions and a lot of car events a lot more people who are a little more senior, we'll say,
Right.
or retired, or towards the end of their careers,
Weekend at
or at
parties.
least don't have kids at home that they have to take care of.
Right.
So that group is now buying into these cars, and there are another big factor in the value of cars is events. What can I do with it? If it's a car that has no events and there's nothing you can do with it, then that's neat, but that's like a race car that you have no series you can
Okay,
compete in.
well, also think about the function of events too. They're providing a sort of a sociological function too, right? I mean, you go there, you hang around with other white geezerly millionaires. You can talk about, you can sort of show off. I mean, I remember I was at a copper stage, and my friend and I were sitting at a table, and we overheard these two guys having a conversation. This guy was talking about an island that he owned.
Yeah.
And then the other guy was like, "Oh, I have an island next to your island." And it's that kind of, yeah. So there's a lot of I feel like people do events because they want to go out in their cars, because they want to sort of mingle with.
They want to mingle with like-minded lunatics.
Yeah.
And to a certain extent, it's because you're with a group of people who have a similar interest and want to do the same things, and it's a little bit like backpacking. If you describe backpacking, it's like, I have an idea. Let's put all of our stuff in the back, put it in our bag, go walk out into the woods, we'll sit by a tree, it'll be great, views will be wonderful. We'll cook on a little camp stove and have boiled vegetables.
It is exactly like that, Patty.
And you describe like driving on a car. Here's a plan I got for you. Here's a good plan. All right, we're gonna get in the car. It's got no lumbar support. It's probably gonna run pretty good. Might catch fire. Not safe. And we're just gonna drive it for a long way. And it's gonna be, there's no AC. It's gonna be a little bit hot and uncomfortable. We may or may not make it, but it'll be a lot of fun. It doesn't sound great. Like one of my favorite events is the London to Brighton run, which I think is a good example of what maintains interest in a part of the hobby that doesn't seem like anyone want to engage in. So the London to Brighton run, for those who aren't familiar, it's the oldest continuously held car event in the world, and it was started in the 20s in London to drive to Brighton, which is on the sea. It's about 60 miles away.
It's a very misleading name.
Yeah, it's a very misleading name.
Yeah.
It's been run every year except for obviously 2020 they didn't do it, and it's done.
Maybe not. Did they do it during the Second World War?
They didn't do it during the Second World War.
Loafers.
But it's for cars built pre-1904.
Pre-1904.
Pre-1904. Yeah.
It's amazing when you see pictures. It's fantastic because there's all these people perched up on like engines with wheels.
This is really where the definition of what is a car was still up for open debate. So you have a lot of different powertrains. You have gas, you have electric, you have steam, and steam could use kerosene fired or it could use coal. Some of them are coal fired.
You have to stoke
the coal and stuff like that. And this runs again 60 miles. And a lot of the cars, the horsepower rating is including quarters, halves, and three quarters. And what's spectacular about it, it's only 60 miles. It takes 8 hours depending on the car you have. Some of the cars can do it very quickly. There's a guy from the Netherlands, he has a 100 horsepower Napier from 1903. That can do it lickety-split. It can't stop, but it can go. It'll do 60, 70 miles an hour, no problem. You can do it very quickly, or you can do it like the guy does in a coal-fired steam car, and then it takes you 10 hours. But it's a hobby.
Do you have like a separate car full of coal, like a train situation? I mean, the car has to carry its own coal.
The coal is actually not the problem, it's the water.
Right, because it turns into steam.
Well, the problem is all of these steam cars at that time have a total loss steam system, which means that every time it's blowing the steam out, it's not recirculating the condensed water. So it's losing all of that water, and it can only fit so much water in the boiler, or in the tank. So there are stops along the way, specifically so that steam cars can refuel, literally refuel with water.
Right.
It's not usually that they run out of propellant for the heat; it's that they run out of water. And then
I think actually, speaking of running out,
are we running out of water here?
wait,
Have we run out of water?
Is my watch? Oh, my watch is still going.
That's usually what watches do. They go.
No, but this is I just got this and it's very old. It's from 1946.
Oh wow!
So
It was a post-war gift.
Yeah, that's right. It was. Because when you get a new watch, particularly an old watch, and then you look down and it's stopped working, and there's this sort of feel of embarrassment and
Is
sadness.
it self-winding or is it?
I don't really know.
Winding?
I'm not sure. I wound it, but I don't know if it's a bubble bag. So I don't know.
Okay.
July 1st?
No box, no papers?
no box of paper.
Oh.
I looked down, it says 10 to 11. I thought, it must have stopped.
No.
Because it seems like it's interminable, this conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Likewise.
Sentiments completely shared.
Yeah. But I mean, the thing about like London to Brighton run is...
In
conclusion, the type of people that are on the event are younger than the type of people you would see on, for example,
because it's all a great laugh.
Because it's a shorter event, you can do it in a weekend, and I think it's a huge amount of fun to engage in these cars that are so different from anything else.
Sure.
And that's one of the huge values in collector cars, especially older collector cars, is the experience is so divorced from what we engage in today. And modern supercars and modern cars generally,
just physically,
they're great. They're phenomenal things. They're better engineered and more reliable. They're better in every way than an old car. I'm not going to argue that point at all. They are better in every way, except for the fact that they're so good at what they do that it's hard to engage with them on a public road in a way that you're like, this is really thrilling. I mean, you can step on the gas and then get to hyperlegal speeds very quickly. But, outside of a track, it's hard to really exercise these cars in any way that's going to
Well, also,
get
it's
the breathing.
the difference between a pre-war car, presumably. I mean, I've never driven one, but I imagine there's so much more happening. Intellectually is probably the wrong word, but like there's a lot more stuff you're paying attention to physically and mentally.
Yeah.
Right. There's dials, gauges, there's things you have to do, all sorts of stuff. Whereas with a modern car, there's accelerator and there's brake and there's steering.
Yeah, it's a much more physical experience and a much more engaging experience because you're having to. It's really just you have to be kind of manning the ship.
Right.
And we joke that today's owner's manuals are like filling up the car. Have someone help you with this. Warning, don't drink the gasoline. Whereas like you look at an old car manual, even car manuals from the '60s, they're talking about spark gaps and like how to change gears in the transmission and stuff like that. And with older cars, you look at the manual, and the manual was literally, this is how to take apart the car and rebuild the car and do every element of maintenance, because guess what? You're going to be the one doing it.
Right.
Or you're going to hire someone to do it. It's a much more involved. And the other thing is, and this is something that's only happened in the last 25, 30 years, you open the hoods of these things and there is an engine. You can see all the bits and pieces and parts that are used to, and now they want to hide whatever's there with covers that are a dramatic illustration of what an engine is, science fiction looks like. But it's just there's something very tactile about being able to see everything together, and how the basic concept's always the same, and how these cars, once you get to ICE engines, they're all basically the same with minor differences in how the valve trains work, but some of them just get it so right, and it's amazing when they get it so right. Like you look at a 1913 Mercer Type 35. The basics of it's pretty simple. It's still body on frame, has a T-head engine, but it just is such a spectacular thing to operate that it's just when everything comes together just right, oh man, and it is more fun to drive than almost any modern thing. Because you're not going very fast. You're going relatively fast. They can do 80 miles an hour, which is really fast for 1913 on little bicycle wheels with no brakes. But it has 4-speed transmission, which is very modern, and it just goes. And it came in third at Indy. And you think about today, there is no car that could race at a high level in modern motorsport and then drive to the bar afterwards to celebrate.
Right.
And I think that's something that kind of is missing, and it's only been missing recently. Homologation only ended in the early 2000s is when they stopped requiring homologation, and nowadays homologated cars people love them because they are so cool. It's the cutting edge of like where we could be as far as I think as far as a car is concerned, is like a race car that you could still sort of drive home. And realistically, the last time that happened was in the 60s, which is why that era is still the most valuable cars.
Have you ever seen those videos? They're on YouTube. They're videos of all these, these actors who used to get together in LA and race their cars. And
they're all on Ferrari 250s.
Yes, and they're just painting they're hand painted numbers on the side with a house.
There was a short wheelbase painted like a tiger.
Yeah. They just because it's just.
They were used cars. They were no longer successful race cars. Right. So they were cars without a purpose. They were just used cars. They were expensive to maintain, which is why a lot of them had Ford and Chevy engines put in. But people would go up to Mulholland Drive, and you look up Ferraris on Mulholland Drive, old Ferraris Mulholland Drive. There's a great video narrated by a guy who was there, and it's just, when you think about it, it's kind of beautiful to see these cars that nowadays. This is one of the problems with cars being valuable. You don't see them being used as much as they used to, because now they're worth so much, and either people are afraid to use a car that's worth that much, or more likely, most of them are owned by only a few individuals, and they're not going to. You've got 2 hands, 2 feet, 1 head, 1 ass. You can only drive one at a time.
But I think what's lovely about those videos is that we've forgotten. For a long time, we've forgotten that those things were just things. It was just something someone bought because they kind of loved it, but we've forgotten that.
Yeah.
Because they're not treated like that anymore.
No, they're treated as assets.
Right.
And I think this is one of the things why it's hard to purely look at them as assets because the base reason why people engage in it is not as an asset. The reason why people engage in it is because they have whatever reason, whatever kink or pleasure, whatever thing that they derive, that they enjoy out of it. That's why they want to have these cars. And they want the experience of owning them or driving them or doing whatever it is they have with it. And that element of it, the people who buy cars because they really love them and they think these are fabulous things for whatever reason they want to engage in it, those are the people who end up with collections that are usually worth the most at the end of the day.
Right.
You look at the late great Fred Simeone's collection.
Right.
He was not buying these for financial reasons. If he was probably he was the Warren Buffett of the business, man. He bought everything.
So for people who don't know, the Simeon Museum down in Philadelphia, he was a doctor, right?
He was a neurosurgeon.
And he
collected sports racing cars.
Right, but the most extraordinary examples from the 50s, 60s.
And he was doing
70s.
it, 70s, 50s, 60s, and the latest cars would be like a 917.
Right.
But he was doing it when there was not any information, there was no internet, and the internet has really democratized information in such a way that you now can buy anything you want, all you need is money, because you need time and effort and investment in that way. And he was, he had to figure out what was he going to buy, so what make and model, and then once he figured that out, which one is the best one to have, and then figure out who owned it. And he did this with, just letters and phone calls. And his collection, if you're in Philly, it's right by the airport, so you can even do a layover. It is so worth a visit. I mean, it is a spectacular collection. But he assembled it because he was so passionate about it. He could never do something like that today. But he could do that then because these cars, they weren't cheap. They were still valuable. But they weren't as valuable as they are today. And it took all this effort, and the sweat equity was the value in there, not the money. But he was chasing after these things purely because he had an enormous amount of passion for them. And as a result of his passion, that passion is why people are ultimately into the hobby.
Yeah.
And that's probably why his collection is worth as much as it is. But on the same note, it's in the foundation, and it looks like it'll be on display publicly for a long time, which is great. I think it offers people an opportunity to see things and preferably divorce themselves from the actual value of the cars and appreciate them for their design and for what they accomplished in period.
Well, I think that draws a conclusion to our Anthropoulos frenzy.
Bonhams.com/motoring.
Well, we get your cell phone on here too.
Eric Minoff, call me.
Yeah.
WhatsApp at the iMessage.
Yeah, 917-266-1630. Eric.Minoff at Bonhams.com. Sell your car, play your car.
You've done the read, you've done the ad read. Now Bonhams has to pay you for sponsorship.
Yeah.
Millions.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man, for coming on.
Thank you for having me. A pleasure as always.
It was your knowledge is depressingly enormous.
Oh, you're too kind. I feel the same way. You've been the radiance of Phil.
I don't know what that means, man, but thanks again for coming on, Eric. It was a real joy.
Thank you for having me as always. A pleasure.
All right.